Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Campus Consortium's Grant Briefing webinar. Today's topic for the webinar is Next Generation Help Desk for Student Services, powered by Artificial Intelligence. Our presenter for today's session is Anthony Humphreys, President at Black Belt Help, and our facilitator today is John Wanamaker, Executive Director of Campus Consortium. We will take questions at the end of today's presentation. Please enter the questions into the chat box or questions pane in your GoToWebinar control panel. Without further ado, please allow me to present Mr. Wanamaker and Mr. Humphreys. Over to you, John.
Very good. Thank you, Rosie. Hi, everyone. I'm John Wanamaker. I'm the Executive Director of Campus Consortium. I'd like to thank each of you for joining us today for our grant briefing webinar on Next Generation Help Desk for Student Services, all powered by artificial intelligence. This webinar will focus on how AI for admissions and enrollment grant and a financial aid call center grant can help your institution implement these solutions at affordable pricing for your campuses. These AI-powered solutions enable institutions to create a robust 24/7 student services ecosystem on campus and will help to assist students with everything from information on enrollment to admissions, financial aid, their course materials, academics, student accounts, and automated personalized responses. We're excited to have Anthony with us today and excited to dig in here. So we'll move on and kick off our informative session today. I do want to give you a quick overview of the Campus Consortium before we dig in. Campus Consortium was founded about 16 years ago and is a leading non-for-profit organization focused on helping our members across the globe in the way that we are sharing out best practices and lessons learned around tech implementation. The consortium's mission is to help members reduce the time, the cost, and effort associated with implementing enterprise IT services by leveraging shared IT services, lessons learned, some of the best practices, so that each member can avoid the feeling of reinventing the wheel when adopting new education technologies for their institution. Our work is underwritten and it is made possible by a number of sponsors. And before I begin the session, I do want to thank all of our technology vendors who support our work and support our outreach. These companies are working to not only support this broadcast, but also a broadcast that we do monthly called Ed Talks. Those run on a regular basis featuring some of the most up-to-date and relevant tech topics and trends in higher ed that are impacting campuses. We are also supported by our tech vendors with publications that we do. We do a series of white papers, case studies, and success stories. And none of this would be possible without the support of our sponsors, including Unified, Quick Launch, Oracle, Black Belt Help, and Salesforce. In today's session, we will hear from Anthony Humphrey. He's president of Black Belt Help. He will talk about AI for admissions and enrollment and financial aid call center services grants, and how implementation of these solutions can be helpful to your institution. With that said, here we have an overview of the two different grants, both the AI for admissions and enrollment and the financial aid call center services grant. These are in-kind grants of software and services underwritten by the Campus Consortium and our technology partner, Black Belt Help, and are designed to provide institutions with these platforms. The AI for admissions and enrollment grant and financial aid services grant provide institutions an in-kind grant for software and services awarded up to $50,000 and $100,000 respectively over a period of 5 years. These grants are intended to cover the costs towards licensing, hosting, professional services, and any support costs associated with implementation of these platforms. With that said, now I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, Anthony Humphreys. Anthony has served higher education in diverse and important roles for more than 28 years and has helped organizations thrive through his expertise in developing, analyzing, and executing growth initiatives. Prior to joining Black Belt Help, he served at education technology companies like Blackboard, as well as Solution. With that said, I'm going to turn this over to Anthony. He's going to kick off our session for today. Thank you, Anthony.
Great. Thanks, John, very much. And thank you to all of the attendees for today. I know it's a very busy time of the year. In the past, when I was a financial aid director for many years and a VP of students, it seemed like we had peaks and valleys. Well, today, I think we have nothing but peaks in higher ed. So it is a bit of a crazy world today. Students certainly are demanding more and more. I used to say they expected more and more, but now today's students really, they don't expect things, they just demand them. So it's really up to us as higher education professionals and administrators to kind of step up to that plate, make sure we can meet their needs, and really help drive them to success. So again, thanks, John, for the intro, and again, thanks for the panelists for joining. We're going to focus again today just on, very briefly, on those two different grant programs. Know that there are other ones out there, but we're heavily focused on artificial intelligence and contact center services here at Black Belt Help. The reason we are is that we know that there's a tremendous need in the higher ed space today. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd love to tell a story, and then I'll kind of get back to the content here. My oldest son, Grant, was a college student at Whittier in Southern California, and he had a great first semester. But I remember over the Christmas break, we received a letter, and that letter from Whittier went something like this. You know, thank you, Grant Humphreys, for being a student at Whittier University. We have some concerns. Number one, there's a tuition balance due of $20,000 that hasn't been paid. We've reached out to you multiple times and we haven't heard. If we don't hear back from you by the end of the winter break, meaning the kind of the holiday, we will dereg your student. So that letter went to my son and to me at home here in the DC area. Now, I had been in higher ed for many, many years, but you can imagine a parent or a student getting that letter without having a higher ed background. So first, the letter was actually incorrect. My son was a swimmer, so he was an athlete on academic and athletic scholarships at the institution. So he really didn't have any balance due. So right away, I read the letter and I thought, well, this must be coming from an ERP system. It's probably incorrect. But then at the bottom again, there was sort of what I would call the nuclear option. They said, you must pay your bill by the end of the semester or your student will be deregged. Well, that would strike fear into any student or any parent's heart, even if the letter was wrong. The reason I tell that story is, of course, the very next day, it was something around December 26th or 27th. I reached out, I called Whittier College, just knowing that I could straighten this out as a former higher ed administrator myself. And wouldn't you know it, of course, every time I tried to call until January 2nd, I got a voicemail from Whittier. And the voicemail said something like, thank you for reaching out to Whittier. We are closed for the winter break. Please call us back January 3rd. So you can imagine my shock and surprise when it said you must pay the bill before January 3rd or be deregged. But when I reached out to either make that payment or to ask a question, the college was closed. So I don't mean to pick on Whittier. They've been a great institution for my son. He did since go on to graduate and become very successful. But the reason I bring up that story is related to this slide today, which is the services that we offer at Black Belt Help. It would have been so much better if I could have called Whittier, and even though the institution would be closed for the winter break, someone at Black Belt Help, for example, could have answered the phone, given me answers, assured me that that letter was incorrect, and said, hey, just disregard that notice. Please tell your son to disregard the notice. We do show that your bill is paid in full as a student athlete, and no, Grant will not be deregged for the spring. So those are all things that, again, I knew as a higher ed administrator, former higher ed administrator, that was probably the case. But if I had been a parent that had never been in the higher ed space, or maybe my son was a first generation college student, that would have caused an enormous amount of stress for that entire week-long process the institution was closed. So I tell that story as a way to link back to the services that I'm so passionate about today that we offer at Black Belt Help. We are 100% higher ed focused. We have about 200 plus clients across the US, and we serve somewhere between 4 to 5 million students every year with 1 million different interactions. And I say interactions versus phone calls because we certainly do get inbound phone calls from students. We also get, of course, live chat messages, emails, web tickets, and SMS text messages. But the bottom line is today, students are reaching out in a multimodal way. They're really reaching out the way that they want to reach out. And they're expecting the institution to respond to them in kind. So I thank you for indulging me with that story, but that story just highlights to me and really was one of the very passionate reasons why I love what I do today. And I love what Black Belt Help does for students and institutions today in terms of filling that gap. So Rosie, if you go to the next slide. One of the other things that we do at Black Belt Help is a lot of student focus groups. We love to hear from students. We don't always think that they're 100% right, but they always have phenomenal feedback for us. So we do a lot of focus groups, both with institutions and students, and we ask different types of questions. But I thought this was an interesting slide in terms of industry trends. My most favorite statistic is the bottom in the middle. 87% of students globally want a single app accessible from any device to manage their entire university experience. That sounds sort of obvious in some ways, but really isn't. And the reason I would say it isn't, and I won't pick on any other institution maybe but my own, when I used to work at State Center Community College District, this was many, many years ago, but I do know that students even back then wish that there was a single place to go to get questions and answers. Unfortunately today, at least when I've been on so many campuses with my middle son and my daughter going off to college at University of Maryland and Virginia Tech, in many cases when you ask questions, they sort of hand you a booklet of phone numbers to call. And they point you maybe to a website that has an FAQ. They might actually point you to multiple websites, which actually I found was more likely the case. The reason I bring that up is it's very rare today that you find an institution that has a single solitary one place for a student to go for any of their questions, whether it's financial aid, admissions, student accounts, registration, IT help desk, LMS questions, etc. And that's what students really want. The concept of going to multiple places today is really just passé, frankly. And as I mentioned earlier, students don't really expect better service. Today, they're absolutely demanding better service. Now, they may demand it in a very quiet voice. And that quiet voice may be, if you don't serve me, then I will go somewhere else. And that is the most deafening voice of all. When I work with a lot of clients in the community college sector, where sometimes 30 and 40% of their students turn over year over year, not due to graduation or transfer, but maybe due to areas that surround multiple issues that students at community colleges face. The idea for our services today is how do we find a way to really drive up student engagement, to really encourage that student to feel part of a larger community, and to feel like there's something more important than just today's class or today's test or tomorrow's paper that is due. So anyway, thanks for letting me share those. Let's take a look at the next slide, Rosie. I think that what makes us unique at Black Belt Help is there are a number of vendors out there that do contact center services. There are a number of other folks out there that do artificial intelligence or chatbots or mobile apps. And there are companies that do student nudging. What I think our secret sauce, frankly, is at Black Belt Help is that we have those three solutions in one tool, one large kind of platform. So what I thought I'd share with you today is what that platform looks like. So our three primary offerings are to the right in yellow. We have an inbound contact center that's 24/7, 365. So yes, that means we're open on Christmas Day, on New Year's Day, on the 4th of July, and every other day of the year. So we are just frankly never closed. We are very passionate about serving students, and we know that students may call Saturday at 2 a.m. in the morning or Monday after classes or after a meeting with friends at 3 in the morning. But the bottom line is there really is no set pattern to students reaching out for help. So that's one of our solutions there in the top right in yellow. The second is that we also realize that many students don't want to call or create a web ticket or email. They may want to use a mobile app. They may want to use a chatbot or a voice bot to get their questions answered. That doesn't even involve a human being. So that's the second square on the right-hand side in yellow, where we have self-help bots, mobile apps, and tools. And the final offering really is what we call omnichannel student nudging, meaning sometimes students forget what they need to do. They are students after all. But sometimes institutions don't always help that. And what they can do sometimes is exacerbate a problem where they over-communicate with students. So again, a very quick story. My middle son, of course, goes to the University of Maryland. His name is Nicholas. And I remember when he started a year ago at Maryland, about a month before classes started, he would get anywhere from 9 to 15 emails a day, all from the University of Maryland, all from different departments, all asking him to do 3 important steps. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are. My middle son is very intelligent as an 18-year-old engineering student, But you can imagine 15 to 18 different departments, three requests each. There's 45 different to-dos that the University of Maryland was trying to get him to do. And with any 18-year-old, that's a challenge. So the reason I bring that story up is that it would be so much better if an institution could nudge students at just the right point in time. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more farther on. But the idea is kind of like our old accounting classes, just-in-time processing. What we should not do is tell students what's due in 3 weeks and then remind them every day for 3 weeks. What we certainly can do is send them an email 3 weeks in advance, but what we then should do as the time approaches is change that mode to be either an automated voicemail or a text message. Either way, those communications should have a single call to action. Singular meaning one, never more than one thing to do, and never without a link that says, do that action right now by clicking here. So that's the idea behind student nudging. So those are the kind of the three solutions that I thought I'd discuss quickly. In red, you can see some of the other tools that we have in terms of a knowledge base, a ticketing system, single sign-on, and all of it really wrapped up within artificial intelligence. So Rosie, if you go to the next slide, please. The question that I usually get now is, well, how do you do that? How do you provide something that, frankly, maybe when I was an administrator 20 years ago in colleges, I begged for? Well, this is how we do it. With today's technology and the way that APIs work and the ease of not necessarily integration, but data exchange, where we're viewing student data, it's very easy now to be able to serve a student and look at data from either the institution's ERP or SIS system there on the left. Certainly, you may include their LMS, their ITSM or ticketing system. They may also have a CRM system as well. And they may also, of course, have multi-factor authentication on the right-hand side. So the idea is that platform has to be able to at least interface with all of those different systems on campus that today are probably very disparate on, if not many or most campuses today. It's very rare that you see a college that or university that has their ERP system that is seamlessly integrated with their LMS, which is seamlessly integrated with their CRM system, right? They might be using a tool for a highly selective nursing program in a CRM system. They might then track those courses in a learning management or LMS, and then certainly store student data in the ERP or SIS. So the idea is, with our platform, is to make sure that we can see data from all of those different systems. Now, we certainly don't change data. That's one of those things that institutions tell us at Black Belt Help, thou shalt not. So we certainly don't ever change data. But every institution kind of says, hey, I really would love for you to chat with our students, whether it's by phone, text, email, chatbot, etc., and answer their questions. And if you go to the next slide, Rosie, you'll see these are the different areas that we can support from across the enterprise on campus. I love, John, how you described it as kind of an ecosystem, because that is exactly what it is. At any campus of any complexity, which would be all of you on the call, doesn't matter whether you're large or small, there's just a huge number of systems on the campuses that are probably not connected. So Rosie, if you go to the next slide, we'll kind of highlight in the OneStop area, what are the different things that we can certainly help institutions with. So you'll see here, we've got kind of a one-stop approach. And when we say one-stop, we really do mean kind of a virtual one-stop. Because many of those colleges that are on the call today, or institutions or systems, and then certainly some in the country, may already have a presence-based one-stop. So you may already have moved to a single location for students to get multiple questions answered. But what happens when the student is an online student and may never come to campus? Or what happens if the student is unable to come to campus, either due to economic issues of cost or just access issues in terms of the ability to actually easily move around and come to campus? So the idea here is that we really want to offer a virtual one-stop that can either take the place of a physical one-stop or at a minimum augment a current existing physical one-stop so that students don't have to come to campus to get questions answered. So we can work with students on questions in any of these areas here, whether it's admissions, financial aid, registration, student accounts, or bursar. I mentioned earlier the learning management system, advancement, switchboard calls, military and veterans, and then IT support. These are the most common. So students may ask questions like, how do I log into my self-service portal? That's probably an IT question, but that may be that they forgot their password. But then very quickly they'll move into, well, great, now that I'm in, I can't really tell whether I've been admitted. Can you tell me if I've been admitted to my nursing program? And that obviously touches the admissions office. They then very quickly will transition to, have you got my financial aid application? To what documents am I missing? And how much do I owe? So in this case, that student, that example student, may have touched 5 different offices within campus that today may have required a transfer around campus. We've heard so many colleges tell us that students call it the fill in the blank runaround. And it really does drive students pretty crazy. But the idea is, how can we, in a single experience, whether it's a phone call, a chat session, a text message, a web ticket, or a chatbot, how do we answer all of those questions from all of those different data sources in one experience? And then answer that question as if we're the institution, right? Because no one wants to talk to Anthony Humphreys from Black Belt Help, but any student like my son Nicholas at University of Maryland would love to talk to Anthony Humphreys from the University of Maryland help desk. So that's kind of the approach. We can also offer either 24/7 services, as you see there on the left, or we can be flexible and offer just after-hours support as well, nights and weekends. So whether you're a large institution or small one, if you have a great team in place today, which most of you probably do in all of your service areas, sometimes they get overwhelmed, especially at peak periods. So we try to be highly flexible, whether you need admission support or just financial aid or just IT or just LMS support. We can offer any combination of these circles that you see here based on each institution's needs. So we try to be very, very flexible with the types of services that we offer, in addition to whether you need 24/7 support or just after-hours support. So if you go to the next slide, we'll kind of talk now more about what we mean by omnichannel. So it's great in the past, many years ago, students would just always call. Well, today with, of course, cell phones being ubiquitous and smartphones being everywhere and everyone having them, they really have opened up the number and the channels of communication that are available, whether it's social media, whether it's a phone call, an email, a chat session, a chat bot, or a student posting something positive or negative on an institution's social media page, be it Facebook, Twitter, or somewhere else. The idea is we want to help institutions really come into kind of today's modern times where they don't have to necessarily just call or come on campus and walk around to get service. We want to offer more of an Amazon type service where they can reach out 24/7 via any mode possible, meaning any omni-channel way they would like, and then also have the choice to either work with an advisor, being a person, or solve their questions on their own, because so many students today, especially Gen Zers and millennials, really want to help themselves first. I think there's a big difference out there between students that are my age, and I'll just say that I'm older, I'm close to 50, versus students that are in their 18 to 20-some-year-olds today. When I was a student many, many years ago, my first thought was, if I had a question, I've got to go get the question asked and some expert could help me. Today, students are very, very different. They kind of think, hey, I'm smart and I can solve this problem myself. I'm sure this question has come up 100 times at XYZ University. I just wish I had a mobile app or a knowledge base that I could search and find my own answer to. And that's what so many students are really craving from institutions today, is either a mobile app that has a click to call, click to chat, a knowledge base that's embedded that can be searched, or again, engaging with a chat bot. Today's students frankly love chat and voice bots, whether it's them using Siri or Alexa or other tools in other industries today. They really know that frankly all of that data is somewhere. And they also know that if that data is stored somewhere as a data point, then it can be also accessed. And that's the idea behind artificial intelligence, which is where I'll go on the next screen, Rosie, if you can advance another screen. This was really kind of a new direction about 4 years ago for Black Belt Help, which was really looking at chatbot technology and how to leverage artificial intelligence. So Rosie, yeah, this slide here. Because what we found was students did call us. Students certainly would email and create web tickets. They might text us as well. But what they really wanted was an engaging, non-mediated experience, meaning a non-agent experience. But they still wanted to ask all of their same questions. Have you received my FAFSA form? Have I been awarded financial aid? If so, how much? How much do I owe? What is my parking ticket? Did that cause a hold on my account? How do I look up my grades? So all of those questions, because those are data points that are either stored in an ERP or in an LMS or a CRM system somewhere on campus, can now be accessed that maybe 10 years ago couldn't be accessed just because there weren't those integration points and APIs. But today we have that ability, and students know it. Again, from working with other companies like Amazon and others, they're saying, hey, if I can call one number and order a pair of socks and a computer from 2 different vendors and call one phone number or use my mobile app to look at the status of my order coming from 2 different places in the world and when that will be delivered, and if it has been delivered to my doorstep, they expect those same level of services, frankly, from today's colleges and universities, right? Because whether your tuition is $3,000, like a public community college maybe, or $40,000, like a 4-year public maybe, the bottom line is that's a whole lot more than a pair of socks and a computer. And if that service exists for those services, we're probably a bit behind the times in higher ed not offering those types of services. And that's really what we've partnered with campus to really enable, is those types of services on colleges today. So that's sort of why we're passionate about chatbots. And Rosie, go ahead and advance the slide, and I'll show you a quick picture of what that looks like. So our chatbot is actually branded as Neo. Pardon us, we are a little bit nerdy. We are software developers after all. So if you get that reference, good for you. But we're a bit nerdy, so it's a matrix sort of reference. But Neo is our chatbot. We will certainly brand our chatbot to each institution. If your mascot is Tigers, then maybe this becomes Tiger Talk or, Tiger Bot. But the bottom line is, I just wanted to show you an example of what a demonstration looks like from Black Belt Help University, kind of our demo account. And you can see there that it's a very engaging but simple to use product that can be used on a mobile app, on a computer desktop approach. But it also has what we call chips in the bottom. Those are those circles, those oblong circles, where students can certainly type a question in. They can also hit the microphone button and do a voice bot, meaning how much is my financial aid? And it understands that voice. It then translates that, asks a question, does a real-time data call, gets the answer, and displays it for the student. But they can also hit those chips on the bottom half of the screen there that may say grants or scholarships or loans, and we can kind of guide a student through what questions we think they might have. Because the whole idea is to be predictive in serving students and to not be as reactive. We know that the student may have to initially ask that question, but that a moment a student asks about admitting to a program, we can be pretty sure they're probably going to then ask if they've applied for aid or what their balance due is. And they might then, of course, ask about payment plans and when priority registration is. So those are the things that we really try to anticipate when we work with students, and those kind of 4 to 5 million students that we get a million interactions a year from, is we try to take them down a path that makes it very easy for them and very simple for them to get questions answered. So that kind of covers the inbound contact center. We talked about that one-stop contact center. We also then spoke of chatbots and mobile apps. The last thing that I thought I'd mention, if you can go to the next slide, Rosie, is student nudging, right? So earlier we talked about the concept of really meeting students just in time. So you remember I told that story about my son that would get roughly 15 emails with 3 to-dos in them. So 45 to-dos a month before class starts. And again, I don't know about you, but frankly, I'd be overwhelmed with 45 to-dos a week before one of the most important college career choices in my life had been made. So the whole idea with nudging is, how do we sort of de-escalate that concern and that stress? And how do we just reach out to students at the right time, the exact just-in-time moment, and ask them to do a single course of action? So what we do with nudging is we create an annual calendar of all the different events across the campus experience, whether they're an inquiry, an applicant, an admit, or an enrolled student. Because it may slightly differ from program to program, but the processes on a campus typically don't change. So there may be a period where a student has to come in for advising. Once they're advised, they may deposit for housing. They may then select a dorm room. They may then apply for financial aid, do registration, etc. But the idea is we'll come in through the implementation process, meet with the stakeholders on campus, and actually build a customized outreach calendar for students that we can nudge. And what we'll do in that nudge is we'll create an escalating process where maybe we do send an email, so that goes to an official campus email. But then 3 days later, if a student doesn't respond, we can then reach out to them via an automated voicemail, leaving them a message saying, don't forget to register for classes. If the student doesn't respond, we can then reach out with a live call. And then finally, maybe the day before they're due for priority registration, we send a single text message that says, today is your last day to register. Click here to register. Because the idea, again, with nudging is to tell them exactly what to do, but more importantly than asking them what to do or telling them what to do is to make it very easy for them to take that single course of action. So what we do there then is that link can then take them to maybe your existing web self-service tool to then register. So those are the different kind of three solutions we wanted to chat with you about today. The next slide, Rosie, we'll talk maybe just a little bit about a couple of the different partners that we work with in higher ed, some very large ones and some smaller ones. One of the ones that we work with, of course, is the California Community College System, where I came from. One of the largest higher education systems, if not the largest in the world. About 2.1 million students, 114 different colleges, in this case, community colleges across California. And what we do for them is every student that's a California Community College prospective student, they actually reach out, and if they have a question about their application called CCC Apply, or California Community College Apply, which is a tool that they built to make it very easy for prospective community college students to register, to sign up, register, and attend community college in California. But if they have a question about that application, they then believe they're calling their local institution. So whether they're looking at Pasadena City College or my alma mater where I used to work at Fresno City College and Reedley College in the Central Valley, they will reach out to that number, and they actually will be reaching our team based here in the US with questions about that application. So maybe they've gotten stuck. Maybe they're a non-resident student that doesn't have a social, but is still an eligible student nonetheless. So they may have that question, and we can help them in terms of that online process to complete. And you can see some of the results there from some of the students. We really strive to resolve 90+% of all first calls that we get. And I say first calls, but should say first contact. We only miss about 2% of the calls of the 100%. Typically, those are things where someone has called and has the wrong number and hangs up. So, but then we always try to make sure that that is a pleasant experience for those students in California. The next slide also talks about Cal State San Bernardino. What we do for them is not a full one-stop offering, but just an IT and LMS offering. Because San Bernardino really came to us and said, hey, our staff have got it covered for student services, but what we really need help for is after-hours IT and LMS support, right? So when a faculty member calls at Saturday at 10 p.m. and says, I'm a new faculty member at CSU San Bernardino, how do I use whatever LMS they may use to do a course copy from fall to spring? We can answer that question. We can also answer a student's question about how to look up grades, how to submit homework, how to reset a password, and things like that. And again, you can see very similar statistics there in terms of the scope of support, a very fast answer rate, and really trying to drive up that level of first call resolution. So the next slide, we're just about done, and I'll pass it over to John in just a moment. But at the end of the day, we always get asked, well, what does this mean for my students or my faculty or staff that are getting support? And I know today we're focusing more on students, but what does that mean? Like, what is your goal at Black Belt Help, and what do you try to enable? You know, it's not about rolling out a mobile app or rolling out a chatbot or providing 24/7 inbound call service. We do all those things. But really what we do, and the reason we get up every day, and the reason that everybody in my company is so passionate about serving students, is that we really want to do these 5 things. We really want to drive up student engagement. And we know that the one way to do that is to always be available for questions. So that's why we're 24/7, 365. Your institutional staff may work either from 8 to 7 every day, or 8 to 5, or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., who knows? But every institution is sometimes different. And sometimes even within the same institution, offices also have different hours, which you can imagine how confusing that must be to students. If the financial aid office is open different hours than the faculty are, than the student accounts or the bursar's office. So the idea is to really take the burden off institutions and be a 24/7 contact center for students. and really make it easy then for the staff at institutions to focus on what you're probably very passionate about, which is either servicing students that need deeper than a transactional question, meeting with students and providing counseling, packaging financial aid, doing transcript evaluations, the things that made me very passionate about being a financial aid professional many years ago. We also want to deploy self-help because we know that students do want to help themselves. We know that they have a keen sense of I can do this, and I'll be maybe even more engaged if you give me a tool to help myself than I would be if you make me call you. One last very short story. All three of my children, frankly, will constantly tell me, Dad, I don't ever use my cell phone to call anyone. And by the way, Mom and Dad, that includes both of you. No offense, we don't call you guys. You call us and we text you back. And that may sometimes seem a little irreverent for us as parents, but the bottom line is that's how students are. And they really want self-help tools. They really want to reach out when they're ready and via a mode of their choosing, not one mode that is forced upon them by an institution. Last couple of points, and then we'll kind of go to questions and answers. We really want to drive up student satisfaction. That's sort of the goal overall, is to make students happier, to provide an easier and more usable experience. And by doing that, we mean all the things that we've talked about today, right? Meeting them where they are, providing multiple avenues for them to reach out, and really answering their questions anytime, anywhere. Because we know those first four bullets will lead to the last bullet, which is really driving up and increasing student success. Now, does that mean that we know that we drive student success? Yes and no. It can help, but we know that's only one part, right? Of course, the biggest part to student success is the academic environment and the environment on campus. But that same high level of service that you probably have on your campus in a physical way needs to be available in a virtual way. And that's how we know that we can help do our part in driving up student success. So I know I've chatted with you a bunch. I'm going to ask Rosie to go to the next slide, and then we're going to do some questions and answers from the group.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. Great session, great info, and appreciate you sharing stories about your kids and all the fun things we have to look forward to with college students in our family. But good to get that overview from you. For those of you on the line interested in applying for these grants, I just want to make sure that we stress with you that our grant applications are due by September 27th. Visit campusconsortium.org to view these applications, print and complete these, and submit those to grant application at campusconsortium.org. Anthony, we do have a few questions that have come in from our attendees today. Would like for you to take a couple minutes to answer those for us. First question, why is combining self-help with live support so important?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's really a great question because so many folks, and like I used to maybe many years ago, I got stuck in the mode of thinking about support in the way that it could be offered, maybe versus then the way that it should be offered. So again, a short story, if you will. Again, when I went to college many years ago and to graduate school, the first day on campus during orientation, I think an admissions counselor handed me literally a binder. And that binder had about 15 to 20 pages of phone numbers in it. And I looked at this binder and I said, Counselor so-and-so, what is this? And they said, well, this is how you get help. And I said, wait a minute, you're saying that I need to memorize or carry this binder with me everywhere I go on campus and remember these phone numbers to reach out for help? And they said, well, of course, how else would you get help? Now, of course, let's just be honest, 30 years ago when I was a student, yes, there may not have been mobile apps, there were not chatbots, there were not self-help devices. But guess what? Today there are. And students, frankly, want a hybrid experience. They may want to ask 2 questions via a chatbot. And then during that chat experience, they may want to say, oh, I want to click to call a human. Let me click on this button and reach out to someone to ask a question. So I think it's a really insightful question in that we know that students today, and really for that matter, faculty as well, because don't forget we support LMS and IT as well, all of us tend to think in a hybrid manner, which is, okay, I've got some easy questions, which maybe can be done in a mobile app. I've then got some harder questions that I think I want to speak to a human about or a person about. And then I may go back and I'd like to get a chat transcript so I can remember those answers. So that's kind of the idea behind a hybrid approach to both a person-based service and a self-help or non-mediated kind of hybrid experience. When those two things can be married, that's really when a student kind of ends that session and kind of goes, wow, like this institution really gets me. They understand that I want to try to help myself. They understand that I might want to call somebody or text somebody that's live. And they also understand that I might just want a mobile app that can tell me where to go for my next class. So that's kind of the idea, is to have a student kind of go, that was a pretty good experience. Versus, oh gosh, I've got to get out my directory and call 15 different people or walk all over campus to find out my 4 different questions that they think are related, but we know in higher ed or not, right? Whether it's how do I register, have you gotten what documents am I missing, and what is my balance due, right? Today, that's 3 different offices and probably 3 different visits or 3 different phone calls on most campuses. And the idea is to not require that anymore. So sorry for the long-winded answer, John, and to whoever's question that was, but it's an important question nonetheless.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the thorough answer too. So next question, how does the Black Belt Help solution help provide services for online students? Can you elaborate on that comment?
Yeah, and that's a challenging one too, right? Because certainly when there are presence-based students, meaning a traditional, which really traditional students today are not traditional, right? In other words, the non-traditional student today is the traditional. So the 18 and under, college student whose parents went to college, that is no longer the traditional student. The traditional student today may be a former military husband or wife that was in the service, has then left, needs retraining, and or may be disabled, right? So the non-traditional student is the tradition today, is the more common student. And when you're dealing with non-traditional students, they may never be able to come to campus. So the concept of calling and saying, hey, how do I turn in my financial aid documents, and have someone say, oh, just come to campus. Someone may very rightly be upset and say, I can't physically come to campus, number one. Or number two, hey, I could come to campus, but I'm online. I live about 1,000 miles away. So how are you going to serve me at the same level that I should get service if I were local? And those are some tough questions. The way that we do that is to really provide those virtual services. So the ability to click to call, click to chat, utilize a chatbot, but really, again, not require the student to come speak to someone in person is really the key. And again, really enabling those tools to be available 24/7 is key for especially online or non-presence-based students. So thanks, John.
Thank you. Next question we have from Gail. Gail's asking, how would this solution tie into other help desk ticketing systems, for example, ServiceNow?
Oh, yeah, good question. So thanks, Gail, for the question. So what we also know, and having done this for a number of years, is that so many institutions may have existing systems or tools that we offer, and we're fine with that. We kind of say that we're agnostic. So a good question from Gail is, hey, I've got ServiceNow as a ticketing system, and I may really like it. And Black Belt Help may have their own ticketing system, which we do, which is Salesforce. But what if Gail's institution doesn't want to use Salesforce? Well, that's okay. Because Gail, we really know that having done this for as long as we have, that we don't want to replace or supplant your existing resources unless you want to. Most institutions made those decisions to choose, for example, ServiceNow for a reason, and you're probably very happy with it. So what we'll do then is integrate our ticketing system to ServiceNow, or use your ticketing service instead of ours. So there are a number of ways that we can accomplish what is really the end goal, which is how do we get all of the data from all of those interactions into your ServiceNow system so that that can stay kind of your database of record, if you will, of all of the different interactions that either we or you have done on behalf of other students. So again, I know that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but our goal really is to never replace things like your existing self-service. If you have a mobile app, you don't need to use ours. Great, I'm glad you have one. We'll just integrate to the one you have. If you have an existing knowledge base or an existing ticketing system or an existing chat tool, wonderful. right? Our goal is to make sure that we can bring to bear tools that you don't have and leverage the ones that you do have with ours. So really, really good question. Thanks, Gail.
All right, thank you for that. Next question for you, Anthony. Can you comment on, when offices are getting really busy during peak periods in the fall and in the spring, how do you help alleviate that?
Yeah, so it's really common, and I kind of told the funny story. I don't know, I hope it was funny. In the beginning, where back when I was an administrator, we had peaks and valleys. I don't know if we have valleys anymore in terms of slow periods. I think we just have less busy periods in higher ed today. So the way that we do that is that first solution, right? We have those three solutions: an inbound contact center, self-help apps and tools, and then last one, student nudging. But in this case, a real way to kind of alleviate the crushing volume of sort of when you come into the office on Monday and you have 100 emails from students, you may have students waiting out the door for the door to open for a question about financial aid or registration or military benefits. And you may also have the phone literally all at the same time ringing off the hook. That's so common in the July, August, and frankly into September period, and then very common in December and January. And then sometimes there's also a mini spike, right, for a early summer term or a midterm being either in April or May. So there really are no downtimes, but the way that we help alleviate that and reduce or eliminate lines on campus is just to offer those types of services where students don't have to just wait in line. So what I mean by that is, again, a short story. All of us have traveled at some point and flown on a plane, and we've been in an airport where you're sitting at the gate and the worst thing that you can imagine happens, which is you hear an announcement saying your flight is canceled, or there are 3 seats left on the next flight, 8 gates down, and whoever gets there first gets those seats, right? That strikes fear into the heart of any traveler. At least it does for me. It creates stress. I've got to grab my family and all of our gear and try to run through the airport and hope to get that last seat. Well, that's just the old way of doing things. So the new way of doing things is to let everybody else run 8 gates and to sit there on your mobile device and then say, oh, I would like to switch my flight from flight number 22 to flight number 27. Click, done. And you've now grabbed your 4 seats maybe, or 3 seats or 2 seats that you need for yourself because you didn't, frankly, do what the overhead announcement said, which was run to the next gate agent and beg for help. The smarter way to do that is to have mobile apps and tools and chatbots where someone could say, how do I get on flight number 27, for example, and have the tool tell you and say, would you like to register? And say yes, and have it do it for you. So that's kind of the idea on college campuses is, let's get students to call in, let's get them to do live chat or chatbots or texting, because we don't want them to have to run around campus looking for answers.
Well done, thank you. Another question coming in from Paul, Anthony. He's asking, how do you connect to all the different systems to get data, to export files, APIs, etc.? How does it stay secure, and how do you verify they are who they say they are?
So great questions, Paul. So the way that we can do that in 2 ways. We do have one tool that we use for our advisors that we also deploy on campuses called the Integrated Advisor Desktop. And that desktop is that platform that I showed earlier where we use either a SQL query. So the inbound, let's say it's a phone call, the inbound query from a student coming from a cell phone can drive an automated authentication event, meaning that student 99.99% of the time is going to call from their cell phone. There could be a desk phone literally next to that student and they will not use it. They will use their cell phone every time. So we know that that student has a cell phone. We know who that student is. That cell phone number drives an ANI lookup or an ANI lookup that does an initial authentication so that by the time I, as the advisor, taking that student call says, hi, I know that it's Paul calling me because it's Paul's cell phone doing a SQL data call back into maybe your ERP system. But that doesn't mean that that student is then authenticated, right? That just means that I think I know who that student is. So then we have to follow your campus's authentication protocol. So it might be something like a ERP student ID, like a colleague ID or a banner ID or PeopleSoft or Workday ID, and then that in combination with the last 4 of their social and a zip code. whatever your individual campus's authentication protocol is, we'll mimic that. Even though we know in theory that we're talking to you, Paul, we will say, well, thank you, Paul, for calling. We have to authenticate you first if you have questions about your student information. If their questions are just about, is the campus open, or things that don't require specific information, then no authentication is needed, right? If their question is just, how much does the nursing program cost? That is not unique to Paul. But if Paul says, have you received my financial aid application, or how much is my balance due, or what documents am I missing, then clearly for FERPA purposes, we have to authenticate that student, and we'll follow that same authentication protocol that you have. So I hope that answers your question. Basically, it's a real-time SQL call based on an ANI phone number lookup, and then it's following your institution's individual authentication protocol whenever we connect with that student. So I hope that answers your question.
I think it should.
Oh, good. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that we have probably just one more that we have time for, and maybe we'll combine these, right? But this question is asking about the staff that are always feeling behind and cannot take time for training. Will your solution help? And then how long does implementation typically take?
Yeah, so we get a lot of questions when we meet with kind of the VPs of students or CIOs or directors of financial aid, whoever those leaders are on campus. And we kind of always hear a question like, hey, I would love to be able to go to NASFA or to EDUCAUSE, or to, if you have a state like I was in California, the CASFA conference. Those are some really high value, low cost opportunities for staff to do staff development. What happens sadly so many times is that the campuses are so busy, they just don't have time to allow staff to go to those usually very local, very inexpensive, but high value training opportunities. So the way that we can enable that is frankly, again, to have all of those phone calls, all of those emails, all of those text messages go to us. So whether it's, hey, I want to send 3 of my staff to the NASFA conference next year in Las Vegas, or wherever it may be, or I just need to close my office for 2 hours to train newly hired staff. But if I close the door and say that I'm closed, a student is going to run to the VP of Students office and complain, frankly, like they should. What do I do? So that's the idea. Instead of putting up a sign saying we're closed, you can put up a sign that says we're training our staff, but here's a number, here's a website, here's a mobile app that you can go to for service right now. So again, the idea is just to give multiple avenues for students to get support versus just a walk-up service. And then the last part of that question was, how long does it take to implement? Anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks is kind of the short answer. It could be a little bit longer if there are 6 or 7 departments selected to go live with, but from the time that a school kind of decides to partner with us and signs a contract to the day that I jokingly say your phones go silent, because that's what happens. It sounds kind of weird, but the phones literally go silent on campus for the departments that we serve for you. That takes, again, about 12 to at the most 15 or 16 weeks from really working with you to build a knowledge base, deploying the tools, training our team, doing test calls with the institution to make sure our answers are right, and then really giving the institution, the college or university, full transparency into how all of those transactions are handled. That's kind of that time period. So thanks, John.
Very good. If we might, Anthony, I want to try to squeeze in another follow-up question we have. This one came in from Gail around what is the process for pulling all of the university data points in order to respond to the students' questions?
Yeah, so Gail, good question again. So what we do there to help, because we know that sometimes can be a barrier where someone in IT says, hey, I need another project, like I need, I don't know what, but I don't need it, right? So what we have actually, we have what we call kind of a data element dictionary for each of the different systems on campus, be it a Lucian Colleague, a Lucian Banner, PeopleSoft, Workday, any CRM, any ticketing system. We've done this enough to where we know the data elements that we want to pull. And keep in mind, we're not pulling and storing data, right? Because what we don't want to do is have another place where data is that's insecure. So we only pull the data for that incoming transaction. So if we get 5 phone calls at once from students from your institution, we're only pulling those 5 students' data. We're not pulling 10,000 or 30,000 of your students' data every day and storing it somewhere, because that means it's then inherently not current. So we always want to do a real-time call via SQL of that data. But again, the way that we know how to do that is we've worked with these systems before, and we give institutions and their IT department a very, very detailed data element dictionary of these are all the fields that we'd like to pull. Here's where we think they live in your system. Can you please just verify? And we do that during the implementation process. So we try to make it as easy as possible. So thanks for your question.
All right. Yeah, good questions all around, group. Thank you. Before we wrap up, I just want to quickly run through again that these two grants, Ad for Admission and Enrollment, Financial Aid Call Centers Grant, Call Service Center Grant, is open until the 27th of this month. To complete an application, visit campusconsortium.org. Each of these are in-kind grants for software and services underwritten by Black Belt Help and are designed to provide institutions with these platforms. I do want to quickly also note on this next slide a number of other open Campus Consortium grants. You'll see listed here on the screen. We have a series of technology grants that we run throughout the year. Here are some of the 2019 grants that are currently open and are designed to provide a variety of solutions and products and services to your institution at a reduced Campus Consortium grant price. So we encourage you to check out campusconsortium.org, where you can learn more about the grants listed here, as well as those that Anthony covered with us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We have an upcoming webinar, grant briefing webinar in October on single sign-on. So we encourage you to look for an invite from us to join that webinar next month. And as a follow-up, we will be sharing the recordings and the slides of today's sessions with you in a follow-up email. And again, thank you very much for your time and for your interest in the grant program and for joining today. Anthony, thank you for a great grant briefing overview and for all the intel you've shared with us today. And we look forward to connecting with you again and working with these great folks who have joined us all. So from the Campus Consortium, I'm going to sign off and thank all of you once again and appreciate your time and interest. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.